Tributes have been paid to the actor Andrew Sachs, who has died at the age of 86. He was best known for playing the role of Manuel, the Spanish waiter in Fawlty Towers.
What you're about to discover will forever change the way you see Fawlty Towers. Behind the laughter of this legendary sitcom is a long trail of heartbreak so devastating that it reads like a horror story. These 10 beloved actors didn't just play characters. They became prisoners of their success, victims of an industry that chewed them up and spat them out. Who could have imagined that the same faces who once filled living rooms with joy would spend their final days battling loneliness, illness, and despair? And how did a show built on comedy and chaos leave behind a legacy stained with so much sorrow? Join us as we uncover the tragic final chapters in the lives of 10 unforgettable Fawlty Towers stars. Number 10. Bruce Boa. Bruce Boa brought unforgettable energy to Fawlty Towers in 1979, playing the loud, demanding American guest, Mr. Hamilton. Viewers laughed at his over-the-top performance, but behind that bravado was a man slowly unraveling. Born in Ontario in 1930, Boa had chased his dream across continents, eventually landing in London during the early 1960s. By the time he appeared in Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back in 1980, commanding respect as General Ryakan of the Rebel Alliance, many assumed his career was secure. Yet Hollywood and the British film industry never opened the doors he desperately wanted. Instead, he was offered bit parts, usually typecast as stern Americans in war dramas or comedies. Each rejection letter piled higher. Each missed role stung harder. The disappointments didn't just end on set. His marriage collapsed under the weight of his frustrations, and the phone calls from his children became fewer as alcohol filled the silence. Colleagues recalled that by the late 1990s, Boa was drinking heavily, using it to numb the pain of a career that never gave him the recognition he craved. Friends described him as witty and charming in public, but distant and withdrawn once the crowds disappeared. By 1997, Bernard Boa's screen appearances had nearly disappeared. At 67, the actor who had once stood beside Hollywood icons like Carrie Fisher in Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back in 1980, and shared comedic space with John Cleese in Fawlty Towers in 1979, was living in quiet obscurity. Once celebrated for his versatility, from playing General Ryakan in The Empire Strikes Back to his memorable television roles on the BBC, Boa found that steady work had all but vanished. Younger actors he had encouraged during his years in London's theatre scene were now advancing their careers across film and television, but Boa seemed stuck. Friends described him as increasingly bitter, convinced that the industry had typecast and discarded him after his Star Wars role. His final credited screen performance came in the 1997 miniseries The Lakes, after which he retreated almost entirely from the public eye. On April 17th that year, he died in Surrey, England, at the age of 73. When news of his death broke, most headlines mentioned Fawlty Towers and Star Wars. Few spoke of the man himself. Friends later revealed the cruel truth. Bruce Boa had been dying inside for years, long before the disease claimed his body. He had been chewed up by an industry that valued his talent only when it needed a brash American caricature, and discarded him when the cameras stopped rolling. His last years were not filled with applause or accolades, but with isolation, watching from the sidelines as others achieved the spotlight he had longed for his entire life. Just when you think it can't get darker, the next story proves otherwise. Number 9. David Kelly. Everyone adored O'Reilly, the bumbling builder whose half-hearted construction in the 1975 Fawlty Towers episode became comedic gold. David Kelly's plangent voice and mischievous timing especially as he proclaimed, "It'll never work," made that character unforgettable. Behind the laughter, however, Kelly carried a private grief so deep that even his longtime fans remain unaware: the death of his only son, David. Though Kelly never addressed the loss publicly, the silence around it spoke volumes. His marriage to actress Laurie Morton, which had begun in February 1961, weathered years of stage tours and filming schedules. But after their son's passing, their home in Goatstown, Dublin, reportedly grew quiet. Colleagues have since recalled that Kelly threw himself into work with a manic intensity. By the late 1990s, he was accepting every offer he could find. A watercolor-wielding Grandpa Joe in Tim Burton's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory in 2005, followed by a final role as a nimble wall guard in Stardust in 2007. On set, he watched younger actors, especially child performers, with an expression friends later described as haunted, as though each tiny face reopened an old wound. Kelly died on 12 February 2012 at age 82 in Goatstown, following a short illness, pneumonia, according to IMDb, surrounded by the fading echoes of the industry he'd never stopped embracing. His Catholic funeral mass was held on 16 February 2012 at the Church of the Miraculous Medal in South Dublin, after which he was cremated at Mount Jerome Cemetery and Crematorium. At the service, his son David, silent for so long, walked beside his daughter Miriam, carrying both pride and sorrow into those final moments. Friends say the truth was heartbreakingly simple. From the day his son died, David Kelly wasn't merely grieving. He was living on borrowed time. He'd been fading long before his lungs gave out. His public roles, be it as O'Reilly or Grandpa Joe, were anything but light-hearted when you knew the weight he carried behind those eyes. Number 8. Steve Plytas. Everyone remembers Chef Kurt, the fiery, meltdown-prone kitchen master Steve Plytas embodied in the Fawlty Towers Gourmet Night episode, released in October 1975. His outburst, "Don't mention the war," sent laughter echoing across living rooms. But behind that explosive energy was a man trapped in silent despair. Plytas was born Phokion Stavros Plytas on January 9, 1913, in Constantinople, now Istanbul. He forged a steady career in the UK, appearing in over 100 films and TV shows from the late 1950s through the 90s. But by the late 1980s, his roles shrank, usually uncredited parts, typecast as the exotic character, a Greek tycoon, a Russian general, a restaurant manager. Off-camera, his marriage to Amy Doris Foxell, which IMDb notes lasted from December 27, 1947 until his death on December 27, 1994, had become hollow, dead in all but name, as friends privately told associates. The couple had long tried for children, enduring years of heartbreak at a time when fertility treatments were limited and invasive. In that house, built in Surrey, England, the silence grew heavier with each passing year. With no children to anchor him, Steve threw himself into work, any work, in a bid to escape the empty echo of home. But offers faded. By the early 1990s, he'd essentially stopped acting. His last recorded screen appearance was around 1990. He told no one what lay behind his resignation to smaller roles, but colleagues say the embers of his passion were dying long before his last audition. On December 27, 1994, Steve died in Surrey. He was 81 years old. The cause was never made public. Some whispered his heart simply gave out. Others speculated about pills. Everyone agrees, though, that he'd stopped fighting long before his body surrendered. The man who once raged as Kurt in a fussy kitchen had surrendered not to performance, but to the void he never spoke of. His final years were spent in quiet resignation, stripped of applause, haunted by absence. Steve Plytas' demise wasn't sudden. It was subtle. The roles faded, the marriage faded, and eventually, so did he. Number 7. May Warden. May Warden was born on May 9, 1891, in Leeds, in England's West Riding of Yorkshire. On screen, she exuded refinement. Roles like the dignified Miss Sophie in Dinner for One in 1963, or the aged Sarah Kingdom in Doctor Who. The Daleks' Master Plan in 1966 showcased her poised elegance. Yet beneath that composed facade, reality was much harsher. Despite these enduring performances, Warden's career never provided lasting financial security. She spent her later years living modestly in London, relying largely on stage pensions and small residuals from film and television work. By the 1960s and 70s, new opportunities had slowed considerably, and she accepted only occasional supporting roles on television before retiring completely. By the mid-1970s, she had lost both the emotional and financial anchor her husband provided. The spotlight had long faded by then. After prominent early work like Dinner for One and those cult Doctor Who appearances, her later roles were sporadic, uncredited walk-ons or character parts. The glamour of her early career offered little relief from the harsh reality. Aging actresses in Britain were subjected to the same brutal industry norms. Past 60, roles wouldn't even be offered for elderly characters unless they fit rigid casting expectations. In those final years, Warden lived in a small rented flat in London. She survived on a meager pension, not enough to balance heating with meals in harsh winters. Neighbors recalled seeing her bundled in layers indoors, bracing the cold because she couldn't afford the central heating bills. And when she passed away, the landlord discovered that she had been quietly selling off personal belongings, keepsakes, and modest furniture, just to cover rent. On October 5, 1978, Warden died in London at the age of 87. She had remained active in her local community until shortly before her death, though her final years were marked by declining health. Her husband, comedian Sylvester Stewart, whom she had married in 1915 after they met on the variety stage, had died 5 years earlier on August 12, 1973. The two had no children, and her estate was modest, reflecting a lifetime of steady but never highly paid work in the British entertainment industry. She was the actress who charmed audiences across generations, yet she died broke, alone, and largely forgotten. The poised figure who once delivered refined lines in sketch and screen was reduced to a tenant surviving on charity and meager pension checks. May Warden's final chapter wasn't captured in showbiz headlines or award reels. It was written in the quiet desperation of everyday survival, in the cramped corners of a flat in London, where elegance had turned into endurance and applause had turned into absence. Number 6. Lewis Mahoney. Lewis Mahoney brought calm professionalism to the role of the hotel doctor in the 1975 Fawlty Towers episode The Germans, delivering lines with such composed precision that viewers believed he truly embodied gentility. Off camera, however, he was locked in a lifelong battle against racism, the kind that tormented you long after the cameras stopped rolling. Born Louis Felix Danner Mahoney on September 8, 1938, in Bathurst, now Banjul, Gambia, he arrived in Britain in 1957, intending to study medicine at University College London, only to be drawn instead to acting and enroll at the Central School of Speech and Drama in London during the 1960s. Even with that classical training and obvious talent, he was repeatedly pigeonholed. Roles dangled in front of him were caricatures, servants, criminals, exotic foreigners. When he pushed back, casting directors dismissed him with familiar words: "Be grateful for what you get." That fight was never just professional, it was personal. He married in 1971, but the union didn't last. Friends said it fractured under the weight of his obsession with dignity and respect, things that should have been automatic. His relationship with his child suffered as well. Long hours, endless auditions, the resistance of closed doors, it all crushed the joy from roles and drew him farther from anything resembling normal. He gave everything he had to the work and to activism. Lewis became one of the first black actors to appear with the Royal Shakespeare Company in the late 1960s and served as vice president of the Actors Union Equity from 1994 to 1996. He helped rename its Colored Actors Committee to the Afro-Asian Committee, co-founded Performers Against Racism in the 1980s, and 1976 helped launch the UK's Black Theatre Workshop. Yet no number of speeches could erase what the casting directors threw at him. Lewis Mahoney was diagnosed with cancer in 2016 and died on June 28, 2020 in London at age 81. In his final interview, he offered a heartbreaking admission: "I wonder what I could have accomplished if I'd been born with different skin." Friends say that summed it up. He'd been fighting an unwinnable war his entire life. The gentle on-screen doctor was, in real life, exhausted, not by illness, but by a system that never let him rest. If you thought that was heartbreaking, wait until you hear what happened next. Number 5. Michael Gwynn. Michael Gwynn's performance as the suave trickster Lord Melbury in the very first episode of Fawlty Towers, aired September 1975, earned him critical praise. Reviewers in The Times and The Stage called his portrayal silky and masterful, noting how perfectly he matched John Cleese's frantic Basil Fawlty. For Gwynn, then 59 years old, the role seemed like the turning point he had waited his entire career to reach. Born on November 30, 1916, in Bath, Somerset, Gwynn had taken the long road to acting. He studied at Trinity College, Cambridge, before serving in the Royal Artillery during the Second World War. When the war ended, he turned to theatre, carving out a steady, if unspectacular, career. Throughout the 1950s and 1960s, he appeared in Hammer horror films such as The Revenge of Frankenstein in 1958 and Village of the Damned in 1960, while also performing Shakespeare at the Old Vic. On television, he became a reliable character actor, showing up in The Saint, Danger Man, and Doctor Who in the 1969's The War Games. Yet, despite his range, the big starring roles always seemed to go to others. That's why Fawlty Towers felt different. The BBC gave it a prime-time slot in 1975. And despite initial mixed reviews, it quickly attracted millions of viewers and later earned BAFTA awards, cementing its place as one of the most acclaimed sitcoms in British television history. Written by John Cleese and Connie Booth, the show offered actors sharply drawn characters and tightly crafted scripts that stood apart from most sitcoms of the era. Playing Lord Melbury in the very first episode, Gwynn portrayed the smooth-talking aristocrat who tricks Basil into fawning over him before being exposed as a con man. The episode became a classic and ensured that his performance was seen by a wide national audience. For an actor who had spent much of his career in supporting roles on stage and in small television parts, it was the kind of showcase he had long needed. Friends later recalled that Gwynn seemed energized after filming. He pored over new scripts that came his way and spoke optimistically about film offers and television opportunities that appeared more realistic after his success on Fawlty Towers. For a brief moment, It looked as if his career might finally break through to the level of recognition he had always sought. But fate intervened just 4 months later. On January 29, 1979, Gwynn collapsed from a massive heart attack at his London flat in Kensington. He was found hours later, alone, the scripts he had been reviewing still on the table. At 59, he was gone before he could enjoy the late career breakthrough he had been working toward for decades. His funeral at Golders Green Crematorium drew several colleagues from the theater and television world, though few close friends. Gwynn had never married and had no children. Acting had consumed his life, and while it gave him a body of work admired by peers, it cost him the personal connections that might have softened his final years. Today, Michael Gwynn is remembered less for the roles he never got, and more for the quiet brilliance he brought to every part. None more so than the aristocratic fraud who helped launch Fawlty Towers into comedy legend. Number 4. Ballard Berkeley. The man who embodied Major Gowan, addled but endearing, was Ballard Berkeley, and his real life towered with decades of quiet compromise. Born Ballard Blashek on August 6, 1904, in Royal Tunbridge Wells, Kent, he carried the weight of an actor's uncertainties through world wars, radio dramas, stage wings, and television sidelines. He made his professional stage debut in 1928, weaving through London's West End and even treading Broadway boards. Yet for all that breadth, star billing always just eluded him. During World War II, he served not as a GI, but as a special constable for the Metropolitan Police, enduring the Blitz over London firsthand, including the traumatic 1940 bombing of the Café de Paris nightclub. For that, he earned a Defense Medal and the Special Constabulary Long Service Medal. After the war, his career remained reliably robust, but only at the edges. He appeared in classic films like In Which We Serve in 1942 and Hitchcock's Stage Fright in 19, played policemen in quota-quickie thrillers of the 30s, and joined beloved British soaps and comedies, The Archers, Terry and June, Fresh Fields, before finally landing the unforgettable role of Major Gowan in Fawlty Towers between 1975 and 1979. By his 80s, though, roles had dried to a trickle. His last screen appearance was voicing the head of the army in the animated The BFG, recorded before his death in January 1988, yet released posthumously in 1989. Off-camera, the applause never quite softened into companionship. Married to Dorothy Long since 1929 in Liverpool, Berkeley's personal life remained grounded in quiet partnership, but neither fame nor fortune followed them into their modest home. By the 1980s, he was living out his final days in near obscurity, far from the bright lights he had chased since the 1930s. When he died at age 83 on January 16, 1988, in Westminster, London, it wasn't breaking news, just a small obituary and a handful of industry names at his funeral. The man who could steal scenes with a stuttered flourish spent his last act unseen. The applause faded, recognition scant, and the audience long gone. A lifetime of refined performance, and still, he died largely forgotten. Number 3. Brenda Cowling. Brenda Cowling, the gentle nurse in Fawlty Towers' iconic The Germans episode, originally broadcast on October 24, 1975, brought warmth and calm to chaos. Off-screen, however, the woman who offered comfort to others was quietly enduring a lifetime of solitude. Born Brenda Rose Cowling on April 23, 1925, in Islington, London, she trained at RADA in the 1940s, where her classmates included future actor Warren Mitchell and writer-producer Jimmy Perry. After completing her training, she began stage work in repertory theater and secured her first screen appearance in Alfred Hitchcock's Stage Fright in 1950, though uncredited. Through the 1950s and 60s, she maintained a steady presence on stage and screen, with small but regular parts that kept her working even if she was rarely in leading roles. By the 1970s, Cowling was appearing in higher-profile productions, including Lionel Jeffries' adaptation of The Railway Children in 1970, in which she played the cook, and Gerald Thomas's Carry On Girls in 1973. Television became her strongest outlet. She appeared in popular British sitcoms such as Dad's Army in the early 1970s, Are You Being Served later that decade, and eventually in Perry and Croft's You Rang My Lord from 1988 to 1993, where she played the cook, Mrs. Lipton, one of her best-known roles. Cowling also remained active in film, with credits that included the James Bond movie Octopussy in 1983, where she played a supporting part. These appearances, combined with her long-running television roles, made her a recognizable face to British audiences for more than 4 decades, even if she never became a household name. She retired only after suffering a stroke in 2006, ending a career that spanned from 1950 to 2006. Yet, as she aged, that career could no longer shield her from loneliness. Living her final years at Denville Hall in Northwood, London, a retirement home for entertainers, Cowling had no marriage, no children, and few family ties. Friends from her early years had passed on or moved away. Younger casts no longer recognized the actress who had once filled their screens. She admitted, in effect, that those connections had vanished long ago. Her stroke may well have been an unintended mercy. Brenda died there on October 2, 2010, at age 85, gone for days before she was found by staff, prompted by the sight of uneaten milk bottles piling up outside her door. The woman who so often portrayed a healer, who offered soothing presence to Fawlty Towers guests, passed away completely alone. There was no hand held in her final hours, no farewell from loved ones, just the quiet realization that the unsung caretaker herself had needed care until the very end. Number 2. Joan Sanderson. Joan Sanderson's Mrs. Richards, loud, demanding, hard of hearing, was an unforgettable force in Fawlty Towers. That 1979 appearance in the episode Communication Problems cemented her legacy as a comic legend. Critics and fans alike still quote her barbs, "When I pay for a view, I expect something more interesting than that." And even John Cleese, who crafted the role specifically for her, called it his favorite episode of the series. But the actress beneath that sharp tongue was marked by a quiet solitude that would break your heart. Born on November 24, 1912, in Bristol, she trained at RADA, shedding her regional accent and earning diplomas in elocution before launching her career with a stage debut in 1939 at the Shakespeare Memorial Theatre. For the next 5 decades, Sanderson built a steady, if thankless, career playing stern matrons, dowagers, spinster types, not the leading lady, but firmly in the repertoire. She appeared in Please Sir from 1968 to 1972, Rising Damp in 1978, Me and My Girl from 1984 to 1988, and occupied the role of Eleanor Prescott in After Henry. On radio from 1985 to 1988, and on television from 1988 until just after her death in May 1992. Despite her presence on beloved shows, Sanderson never married or had children. She dedicated herself entirely to the craft, and as television evolved, meaningful roles for actresses of her age dwindled. By the final years of After Henry, her health was fading. yet she continued working until filming concluded, only to pass away a month later, on May 24, 1992, in Norwich, at age 79. Her passing was calm and understated. A memorial service was held at the Playwrights' Church, St. Paul's, Covent Garden. A fitting, whispered farewell for a woman who delivered such loud, unforgettable performances. There was no sensational obituary, no grand celebration, just the final line in a career spent bringing scenes to life. Joan Sanderson's Mrs. Richards may have dominated the screen with her shrill complaints, but the woman behind the character lived subtly and quietly. She died respected, if uncelebrated, an elegant performer whose final act was to bow out with grace and dignity. And yet, the most devastating story of all is still to come. Number 1. Andrew Sachs. You knew him as Manuel, the fumbling Spanish waiter whose halting English and perpetual confusion delighted millions. Andrew Sachs brought that role to life so memorably that Manuel became a gilded cage. Casting directors saw nothing else. Despite years of uncredited film parts, radio dramas, and classical training, the actor behind the mustache remained buried under a stereotype. Born Andreas Siegfried Sachs on April 7, 1930, in Berlin, he escaped Nazi Germany with his Jewish father's family in 1938 and settled in Kilburn, North London. He studied shipping management but drifted into acting during the late 1950s, debuting on screen in the 1959 film The Night We Dropped a Clangor, and on stage in the 1958 farce Simple Spy Men. On radio, he shone in experimental productions by the BBC Radiophonic Workshop. In 1960, he married actress and writer Melody Lang, who appeared alongside him in one episode of Fawlty Towers, Basil the Rat. The couple had 3 children, 2 stepsons and a daughter born in 1961. Manuel appeared across both Fawlty Towers seasons 1975 and 1979, turning Sachs into a household name, but it also typecast him. His later credits included radio narration, voice work, and roles like the hotel manager in the Are You Being Served? Film 1977, but none shook Manuel's shadow. In 2012, Sachs was diagnosed with vascular dementia. It robbed him of speech and mobility and confined him to a wheelchair in his final years. His brilliant memory, once capable of carrying lengthy dialogue, began to fail him. He struggled even to recognize his wife, Melody Lang, whom he had loved for decades. When Andrew Sachs died on November 23, 2016, at age 86, at Denville Hall in Northwood, London, a home for entertainers, it marked the end of both a storied career and a lonely decline. The public tribute came quietly. The BBC aired his episode Communication Problems the day after his funeral on December 1, and John Cleese remembered him as a sweet, sweet man. The tragedy of Sachs's final years wasn't in losing his voice on stage. It was in becoming like Manuel in real life, lost, confused, and unable to make himself understood. His last words, if he spoke any, remain unknown, and that's a wrap. These 10 performers gave everything they had to create moments of joy that still make us laugh today. The next time you watch Fawlty Towers, remember these fallen stars. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, leave nice comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more interesting content. Check out another interesting video by clicking on the video appearing on your screen right now.